People Before Profit will be supporting the Labour Party bill, and we welcome it. It has indeed some similarities to the right to housing bill that People Before Profit recently put forward in this House, and which gladly did pass to second stage, in that it seeks to delimit the rights of private property relative to the social good, the common good of ensuring that people have a right to housing, to secure and affordable housing. And insofar as the bill seeks to empower local authorities to compulsorily purchase land suitable for housing and to ensure that landowners and particularly land hoarders, property developers hoarding land, do not benefit, as they have obscenely, from the ownership of land that is rezoned or is serviced, then this is a good measure which will help control land prices, which of course have significantly contributed to the current housing crisis, particularly the extraordinary unaffordability of the housing that has been built, and indeed to curtail the shocking, obscene profits made by land hoarders and speculators, and of course deal with one of the key issues that contributed to corruption in this country around the rezoning process. So for all those reasons, we will support, People Before Profit will support the bill. We think the government's deferral of this bill is an absolute disgrace, and their justifications are threadbare, but as usual they are dancing to the tune of the private market, the developers, the investment funds and the speculators, and for that reason the Labour Party's criticisms today of successive Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael governments who have not wanted to implement the Kenny report, who have danced to the tune of the developers and the speculators who've caused this housing crisis, is absolutely just and valid criticism. But as others have said, the Labour Party needs to stick up their hands and acknowledge that when they were in office they did not bring forward this bill, and indeed they moved in exactly the opposite direction, because empowering local authorities, start giving them the right to compulsorily purchase land that could be hoarded or is being hoarded for housing, and creating the legal framework for that, is absolutely useless if, when you're in government, you simultaneously unload land that is in public hands on an unprecedented scale in the history of the state into the hands of the very investment funds and speculators who have created the crisis. And of course, that's what happened during the 2011-2016 Fine Gael Labour government, with housing ministers largely from the Labour Party and a public expenditure minister from the Labour Party. And I remember so vividly appealing, as others did in this House, appealing to the Labour Party about the folly of unloading what turned out to be 40 billion worth of land assets that were finally in the state's hands, back into the hands of the vulture funds, the speculators and the property developers who had wrecked the economy. And we need to think about this, because this also speaks to other things that need to be in the bill. I'm not just saying that to score points. That land and property is probably worth double now. Probably worth double. We know that vast profits have been made off it. We know that half of these SHDs are probably on land that was unloaded by NAMA under a Fine Gael Labour government into the hands of these people, and they're sitting on it. And this bill won't even deal with that issue, the planning permission issue. The value of that property, 40 billion of land that was in public hands, given over to these people, then they get planning permissions with these SHDs that doubles its value, and then they sit on it. Now, this bill won't even deal with that, as much as we support it. We need to unravel the damage that was done in that period. We need mechanisms to take that land and property back off those people. We need to explore absolutely every avenue to get at the windfall profits that they made, the profits they made because they weren't taxed properly, in order to recover the damage that was done that has led to the current housing and homelessness crisis. So absolutely we support this bill. But we have to acknowledge the damage that was done because we have to undo that damage. And we have to call out NAMA Part 2 in the form of the LDA, which after NAMA is going to turn out to be the next biggest heist of public land that could be used for public and affordable housing to address the housing crisis, but instead, just like the NAMA disaster, is going to be some of the public land bank to be unloaded into the hands of private financiers and investment funds, leading inexorably to the same disastrous consequences that we had in the past. And I have to use this opportunity as well to just give you an example of how much further we have to go to undo this damage, which is a case in my own area that I've raised repeatedly. Of course, there's no government minister even here. Sorry, there's a junior minister here. Apologies. The St Helens Court development, which has many aspects of it, but where working people who've lived in an apartment complex, in many cases for 20, 15, 5 years, owned by vulture funds. And they are sitting on, they've managed to drive out about 3/4 of the tenants. They're trying to evict the rest of them, people who've done nothing wrong. But as part of their plan of driving up the value of that property, 10 of those apartments have been sitting empty for 2.5 years. Perfectly good, refurbished apartments, just sitting on them empty. And that's just one case, but that's happening all over the city. Now, what are we going to do about that? What are we going to do about that? Because just doing what's in this bill, as good as it is, doesn't undo that damage. What we need is a proactive policy of any developer, investment fund landlord sitting on empty property in order to drive up its value and evict its tenants has to be stopped, and that property has to be taken off them. And they shouldn't gain a red cent. It shouldn't be 125% that they should get on it. In fact, it shouldn't even be 100%. The maximum they should get is the cost of which they acquired it, and nothing more. There should be no allowance for them to make profit out of planning permissions, out of sitting on land or property or speculating on. Indeed, they shouldn't be allowed to evict people who've done absolutely nothing wrong, as they are trying to do in St Helens Court and in many other places. When you look at the figures that have come out this week about the number of evictions that are taking place, huge numbers of tenants who've done absolutely nothing wrong are going to be made homeless. Because these people are allowed get away with it. So yes, we support the bill. We absolutely condemn the government's decision to defer it, but we have to go a lot further to undo the absolute disastrous damage that was done as a result of NAMA, and that the government wants to repeat with the LDA in terms of the privatisation of land that was or is in public ownership.